Hello, my name is Michael Eaton, and I'm here to do my version of a TED Talk on loneliness. But I'm going to call it a Mike Talk because my name is Michael Eaton. But if you meet me in person, I probably would shake your hand and say, "Hi, my name is Mike." So today I want to do my Mike Talk on loneliness, and I pray that this will be an idea worth spreading as we deal with the loneliness epidemic in this world today. And I'm going to do my little TED Talk about loneliness, and I'm going to use three cities to help explain loneliness. Not particularly in this order. I'm going to talk about New York City. I'm going to talk about my hometown of Dallas, Texas, and I'm going to talk about Abilene, Texas, in the context of loneliness. I want to start out with New York City. I was writing a book on loneliness, and I'll tell you more information after my TED Talk about that book, but I ran across a video where a young lady who had moved to New York was sharing some surprising facts about New York, and it was very informative. She was talking about how difficult it was to get an apartment in New York and how high the rent was in New York for a 700-foot apartment. You could be paying $2,800 a month on rent alone. And she was sharing about the housing market. There is no housing market in New York because most people can't afford to pay a $200,000 down payment for a 700-foot apartment that would be worth about $1 million. So there's no real housing market, and people in New York, they have roommates to make it. So she talked about the weather, the hard, harsh winters in New York, and other things that were surprising to me because I visited New York and loved Manhattan like most people who visit. We love Manhattan. The regular New Yorkers don't think that's really New York. But I love Manhattan, but I had no idea that it was so difficult to live there. And the one thing that was shocking to me that she shared was the crippling loneliness that she said she experienced there in New York. And this kind of blew my mind because I'm thinking in a city of 8 million people, you feel alone. And that was surprising. Before I wrote the book on loneliness, it was surprising, but I would learn that 52% of people in New York feel lonely. And I also discovered in another city of 8 million people, London, England, that statistics said that there were 56% of the people there felt alone. I began to think and wonder why that was. And it really began to make sense from my own life experience. The young lady had graduated college, and like a lot of people do, whether they graduate college or not, they go to New York looking to live the dream. She was working in the fashion industry, so she went there to work, and she only had one friend in New York. In New York, as you know about New York, it's not, at least that Manhattan part of it, is not family friendly. It's not friend friendly because you have to hustle and bustle, and you're too busy trying to make it to develop really intimate friendships. And also, they say if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. And that seems to be true because if you're paying those prices, if you could make it there, you can make it anywhere. But 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be making it without friends or family. And that can make you feel horribly alone. So what I learned about these major cities and really all metropolitan areas are a lot of times they're a place where the loneliness epidemic exists. People are around people, but they feel alone because they're so busy trying to make it, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, not having the time to develop intimate friendships, having left family and friends, in her case, back in school, and she was still away from home. So it left her very vulnerable. And I began to relate to her in my experience. Now, we're talking about major metropolitan areas with a lot of people where you can't be in a crowd and still feel alone. But I left Dallas, Texas, and surprisingly, I discovered that Dallas, Texas, the metropolitan area, is the 4th largest populated area in the nation. New York, of course, being number 1, LA being number 2, Chicago number 3, and Dallas is number 4 on the most populous area. So I left there where I was connected. I was in a church that I loved, and I loved my city. There was no way on planet Earth I was going to leave my city. But I'm a Christian man and developed a relationship and discovered my purpose for living and call in my life, which is to pastor and to write. And God led me from this major metropolitan area, from this church that I love. I mean, I love my church, still love it today, but it's nothing like loving somebody while you're up on them. I love them from a distance now. But I love my church. And in my church, I had family, blood relatives. I had people who knew my family back in Crowville. And it was a place where I discovered my purpose for living my life. So I was in hog heaven back in Dallas, in my hometown. And God called me to a place called Abilene, Texas. Abilene, Texas was wonderful to me. I was truly blessed in Abilene, Texas. But when I heard her story, I reflected back to the time I was here in Abilene, Texas. And in Abilene, Texas, I could relate to that song that Britney Spears talked about. She said, "My loneliness is killing me." And in Abilene, Texas, my loneliness was killing me because unlike her in the city of 8 million people, she knew one person in Abilene, Texas. It's a city of 100,000 people, and I knew one person there. And needless to say, man, I felt so alone. I mean, truly, when I say I felt my loneliness was killing me, it was horrible because of the hustle and bustle of ministry there. And it was a very difficult assignment. Some young people say they understood the assignment. Well, I didn't understand my assignment when I first went. And it was very, very difficult. And I didn't have family and friends around. And it left me feeling all alone and lonely, because you can be alone and not feel lonely. But I was alone and lonely there in Abilene, Texas. And I had to pray to God, and God had to send me my wife to Abilene, Texas. And ever since the Lord sent my wife to Abilene, Texas, I mean, I like to say that I never really felt alone again, because everywhere I am, I have my wife with me. And loneliness is simply the act of not being connected, not being connected. In a time where we're connected through our phones and through social media, it is still a time where we are dealing with the epidemic of loneliness. And I think the pandemic played a horrible role in this epidemic. And it caused people to be separated. Just the millions of deaths alone, there are people who are separated from their loved ones. And really, a separation from your loved ones could be a horrible, horrible cause of loneliness, especially if you were married for 40 and 50 years and your mate passes. You're going to experience loneliness. You may be a high school person that just went off to college. You're going to be leaving family and friends and have to try to establish your own life for the first time. And loneliness is going to be a part of what you have to deal with. Or you can be like that young lady who graduated college, the cocoon of friendships that last a lifetime, and go to this big, mean city at times, hustling and bustling. You're going to struggle with a loneliness. Whenever you're in a place where you're not connected, you're going to deal with loneliness. And many of us don't get to spend our whole lives like in Dallas, my home church, where you feel connected, and because of some transitionings that have to take place in our world, like imagine there's an epidemic of loneliness in Ukraine where families are being torn apart. 300 million folk having to leave and establish a new life in other places. There's an epidemic of loneliness because their life is disrupted in a bad way, and it can be disrupted in a good way. Me going to Abilene, Texas was good, but my life was disrupted and I was disconnected in many ways. But God helped me to get through my loneliness, and He helped me to share these personal experiences that I felt to kind of encourage others to get through their loneliness. And this is why I'm doing my TED Talk, or what I call my Mike Talk today, is to encourage you that you can make it through those periods of transition in life, whether it is, again, the separation from a loved one through death, which especially if you were really, really connected to that person, you'll experience loneliness. So whether it's a good transition, getting a promotion, going and reestablishing yourselves, especially in the beginning parts, you're going to deal with loneliness. But I believe today that you can make it. And that's the reason I did this TED Talk, and I encourage you to stay connected. And that's what I've been saying at my church at Bethlehem through these pandemic times, that I have a saying, Bethlehem, stay connected. And I tell them to stay connected to God's person, stay connected to God's precepts, and stay connected to God's people, not knowing that really that's the key to overcoming loneliness in the world for anyone today. And I did this TED Talk to encourage you that you can make it through a time such as this. Hopefully this talk will encourage you. If you need other resources, I shared many of my experiences that I talked about today in my book entitled How to Overcome the Psalms of Loneliness. And Psalms is a book in the Bible. Then I look at the most encouraging book in the Bible, the book of Psalms, and I use information there to encourage you to overcome loneliness and depression. So if you're struggling with loneliness and depression today, I want you to go to my Amazon authors page, and the book is coming out today, March the 31st, 2022. And you can visit my Amazon page, and my Amazon page is amazon.com/author/Reverend Dr. Michael Eaton. It's REVDR Michael Eaton, is spelled EATON. And you can get this book, and it will be a resource for you to overcome your loneliness at this period in time. I want to thank you for listening to my, what I call TED Talk, that I turned into a Mike Talk. And I pray that you will be encouraged today. Thank you for listening. God bless.